Hi everyone and welcome back to the Colour Cave where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem and as I mentioned in the last video, today we're actually not doing something related to a subscription box, which is quite refreshing. We are sticking with our recent theme of painting, and one of the things I did in the last video was we talked about the paper that came in the up crate. And it was paper designed for acrylic, but it was 400 GSM paper. That's really thick paper. And I wanted to test out layers and layers and layers of watercolour on it, just because I've never worked on 400 GSM paper before. So that is what we're going to do today. So here's my little square that I rescued from that up crate. In addition to that, I have been lucky enough to have been gifted some of the black velvet paintbrushes. These are by far the most expensive paintbrushes I own now, and it's something that I really wouldn't have done by myself. So thank you to my gifters for these. I did buy one myself. I bought this one myself. And that was before I knew that I was getting this one. So I've ended up with 3. So I really want to just test these out today and play with them because I've never played with them before. In addition to that, my friend and long-time enabler, Miss Julia K of Julia K Art Studios, that is our lovely Swedish friend that creates wonderful handmade watercolour paints. If you haven't heard of her, where have you been? I am leaving links to her YouTube channel, but also to her Etsy store where she sells her handmade watercolour paints if you would like to check them out. They are absolutely fabulous and I use them very, very often indeed. She, naughty girl, was having a conversation with me about using indigo and Payne's grey, which I really like a dark moody blue, and she said to me that if I did not have the Daniel Smith Payne's grey that I need it in my life. Now obviously when someone who is a true watercolour artist tells you that you need a specific paint, you're going to go and buy it, so I went and bought it. So I just bought a little weenie tube of it. This stuff is absolutely not cheap. And I decided I'd just get myself a little tube of it. So I prefer to work from a pan. So some time ago I put some in a little half pan here. So this is, you can see I've written on the side of it, this is this, but it's just been put in a pan and it's dried out a little bit. So this is what I'm going to be working with today on this paper with these paintbrushes. So I'm really excited about this because this is 3 things that I haven't tried. Now obviously this gives the potential of this artwork and this entire video to be a disaster because I've got no idea what's going to happen. One thing I do know is that normally when I'm painting with watercolour, I get on really well with cheap synthetic paintbrushes. I don't know why, it's just the way it works. And I know for a fact that these brushes hold an awful lot of water, so that is something that I'm going to have to adjust to because synthetic brushes do not, should I say cheap synthetic brushes, like the sea white brushes that I stock in the shop. I use these all the time, I love them. These hold significantly less water than the likes of these black velvet brushes, so I'm going to have to try and compensate for that a wee bit, and that, you know, this may or may not go well. So we're going to try. So we're going to paint something monochromatic. There are going to be lots of layers involved because I want to test out this paper. And I did think because we're going to be doing a lot of washes, it would be best to tape it down. So that is kind of where we're at. I've got a little ceramic palette here and it's just so I can have different dilutions because we are only going to be using the Payne's grey. I thought a good subject matter for this would be like a stormy sky. Really make use of the Payne's grey, which is a grey colour that has a lot of blue in it. So first things first, I'm just going to take a little bit out of my half pan, which I've pre-wet. Gave it a wee scoosh earlier. Oh, look at this colour. I also don't know how this paint is going to behave. I've got a few Daniel Smith, you know, like dots, like colour dots, and a few tubes, but it's not a paint I've used very often, so I don't know how this is going to go, but we're going to find out. So I've got a little spare sheet of paper here and this is just to test it out, see how this goes. So I just want to wet the brush and pick some of this up and just see. Oh, that's such a pretty colour. That's such a, oh, so pretty. Pretty. Okay. okay. I am going to get my mop brush and I just want to wet this paper. Oh, that was a bit much on the waterfront there, okay. And let's just see let's just see what's going to happen here. Well, I have to say it's travelling on the paper the way I hoped it would, which is really nice. I've got a bit too much water there. You can see the reflection. That was a bit heavy, but that's okay. So I'm just loading up a little bit of paint at the bottom while this is still really wet, just as a base here, and we'll obviously start to work on top of it in due course. There we go, so we're getting there now. I'm just adding a little bit of colour down the bottom here. So I just kind of like went and then, we don't like, I kind of go by the seat of my pants with stuff like this. But what I'm thinking now is that we'll have like a nighttime cloudy sky, but over the water. So, oh, I'm coming unstuck already, oh no. So what I'm thinking is that we'll build up this bottom colour first, because we want this to be quite dark, and I'll probably go in with some white gouache at the end, and we'll pick out some highlights, so there's a bit of movement in the sea, and that'll just help things kind of pop out a little bit. So I think that's a good plan. And I'm using the, this is the number 10 brush, so this is quite a big brush, and obviously we can use the other ones as we go, but it's so uniform, and the point on this, look, that this is really nice. I feel a bit spoiled actually, and kind of almost not worthy of using a brush like this, because you'll all know I'm past the point. I don't say that I'm not a painter anymore, although that was my hashtag for a while, hashtag I'm not a painter, and now it's a hashtag okay, maybe I'm a bit of a painter. But I just feel with really expensive tools like this, you kind of feel like you maybe don't do them justice sometimes, and especially when it comes to watercolour, I certainly feel that way, because I don't think my watercolour skills are particularly magnificent, but that doesn't mean that we can't keep practising, and to be able to practice with really nice paper, really nice paint and really nice paintbrushes, that's unheard of for me. So I'm just going straight into the half pan here. This is obviously wet, you can see I'm making marks there. But what we'll do is we'll just put on another couple of layers. Now this doesn't have to be glass smooth, because we do want movement in the water, and I think we're kind of getting there with that. But I think I need to bring this up a little bit higher. And then I want to kind of fade this out, because I don't want, because it's going to be night time, I don't want a really defined horizon, because the dark sky is obviously going to kind of merge in here. I kind of need to do the same at the top, so I'll water this down a bit. And again, not necessarily going to keep this particularly even, but we do want to build it up. So I've got a clean rag here. You see I've got a very defined line there. Make sure I just get this out of the way. You can use tissue for this. You can use the thirsty brush technique as well, which I'll demonstrate probably at some point. There we go, and you can see that's just lifted that really harsh line that was there. Maybe zoom in a wee bit again. A little bit of pigment there. How dare you? Oh yeah, that looks like the start of an angry cloud. I like that. I'm really easily pleased, I know. Just humour me, guys, come on. This brush is just perfect for this. I'm having such a good time already. We've only just started. Oh my. So I suppose, I know we're kind of like testing these things out here just now, but I'm kind of trying to point out as well that you don't need loads of, different colours and, like crazy stuff going on to make a really, really good painting. Like, you just don't need it. And I do have a bit of a thing about monochromatic paintings or artworks in general. They have a certain aesthetic appeal for me. It's been a long time since I've done something like this. Normally, monochromatic for me means doing like a full piece in graphite. You don't get much more monochromatic than that. So it's nice to switch over. But see, I do have a bit of a thing about indigos and all that jazz. I think I maybe switch to a smaller brush for this. Just as we start to build this up. The paper seems to be coping really well with this, considering it's not actual watercolour paper. It seems to be quite happy, even though I'm absolutely battering it with lots of water. Yeah, this is the kind of depth I'm hoping for. See what's going on down here. Now, obviously we need to wait till it dries so that we can really, get working kind of thing. Once I'm satisfied with the depth of the water, that's when I'm going to change brushes. I want to keep a wee bit of a light bit somewhere here though. Now this is still damp, so the paint is kind of doing its own thing, and that's okay. Again, for these sort of background layers, I'm quite happy for the water to take the paint wherever it wants to go. And then if we want to be more specific, you know, we can work on that in little sections with our weeny brush, our little number 2 here. So trying not to be fussy, and this is one of the things that I've been trying to, like, really trying to work on, is to stop being so, like, control freaky with paint, especially watercolour, because it, you know, it's meant to flow, it's meant to do these things. So you kind of got to let it do it, you know. I just want to, well, that's a lot of water in this brush. I'm forgetting already how much water that these brushes hold, so just trying to remember that. I have a feeling that the bottom part of this paint is going to be one of those ones that I just keep going back and putting more and more paint over. Like, yeah, I'll just put another little bit there, that'll be fine. I don't like this mark that's here. I don't know what that is. I thought it was just a little blob of paint. It's not lifting though. The paint round about it's lifting. Can you see that? So we've established that the lifting properties are fabulous. Okay, so I need to bring the sky down darker, so I'm basically just going to put a really light layer. Oh, I've got a jock here on that. Oh no. Get out quick. Get off. Yeah, I'm basically going to just put a little bit quick wash down here. And then I can start building up some more colour, like over the top of this, and bring it down. So now what I'm wanting to do is build that line where the clouds stop and the sky starts here. So I'm being a bit more specific and just set out this boundary now. So you can see this cloud formation is really starting to form up here now. And with the subsequent layers, I'm going to use less and less water so that becomes more intense. Kind of like I did down here, but just with like a bit more shape to it. And my number 8 brush is clean here. It's damp. Now I'm just starting to lift this area here. And this will become apparent why I'm doing it in just a wee while. But I really need to map this area out for myself. Alright, so I've gone back in with more and more layers, and you can see I've kept this little bit paler here, which we're gonna put a lightning bolt in there, so it's gonna come from here, and it's gonna come down and hit the water, but we're gonna do that in gouache, like I talked about earlier. So now what I want to do is focus a little bit more on the clouds, so I'm switching to the number 8, so it's slightly smaller than the brush we're just using. And I'm basically going to be going from my little half pan here, which I'm going to have to pre-wet again because it's dried up a little bit. So the paper seems to be taking the paint really well. Just over time I keep sort of assessing it to see. There is a particular texture to this paper which maybe wouldn't be my first choice, but bearing in mind this is supposed to be acrylic paper. So these darker patches now, what I want to do is just start to join them up to give us a more severe impression of the weather, because right now the sky looks a little bit sort of sinister, but I just feel that the impact isn't there. So I'm just picking and choosing where I go, but essentially what I'm doing is joining up some of these darker areas to give a more sort of solid feel to this cloud base, like it's really come down over this sea. And I just want to get some definition in between some of the rows of clouds, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but obviously it's not going to be one big solid mass, but these clouds are sort of layered and built up on top of each other. Again, I kind of feel like with clouds, I kind of feel it a little bit the same as I do about trees. There's actually no wrong way to do them, you know, but there's just some ways are more impactful than others. Now this section here I feel is far too disjointed. I feel like this dark area here should maybe be linking up a little bit more. And maybe on this underside here it might dilute a little bit. So again, just working my way around here. And I'm just using my previous layers. You know, I can see those lighter layers that have dried a little bit. I can see where the edges of those are, so I'm kind of using those as my guidelines here. I've got a weird, it must have been a bit like a random brush stroke. That might have been a a gem hand spasm that I wasn't entirely aware of at the time, so I'll maybe try and just blend that in a bit. But that's created quite an interesting effect there, so yeah, why not? So I don't want a completely solid line there, but I need this to be more defined to show where these clouds stop and the clear part of the sky starts, because if I don't do that, then it's you know, because we're only using one shade of paint here, it's just all kind of like into each other. Once again, technical terms. So just make that stand out more, and then again just sort of connect this up a little bit to what's going on a little bit further up. So there we go. We can see like this is like a definite line now. I'm quite enjoying myself here. This is great fun. And again, this is just really about building up layers. Now, I'm reckoning, I've actually not been keeping count, which is quite unusual for me, but I reckon we're probably on about 12 layers of paint. Okay, all of those weren't washes, but this paper is standing up to this like a boss, so I can fully recommend it if you want to get really washy type stuff on the go. Yeah, I think we're good for this. And these brushes are a delight because they hold a lot of water. You know, they have quite a big capacity for absorption. You're not constantly dipping back and forth between your water and your paint, and then onto the paper and back again. So it gives you time to do what I'm doing here and just fiddle about. And if you need to dip into your half pan, then you can just kind of make your way back and forth. I have got a hair in there again. Unsurprisingly, a dog hair. Something that I'm noticing, obviously it's been a few weeks now since we lost Woo, and I am still finding her hair everywhere. Jack Russell hair is very persistent. It's equal parts. Sometimes it makes me laugh and sometimes it makes me cry, and I think that's just the stage that we're at. But her presence is still definitely felt. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Okay, so I'm happy with my clouds now and I'm happy with the water. What I'm not happy with is this section in between. I do have a few watermarks here, and to be honest, I think they've been dry too long. They may be too dry to rectify. So I'm just going to take this big brush again. I'm going to try and soften that out a little bit. As I say, and I say this all the time, I am not proficient in watercolour. It is not my first medium, and although I enjoy messing about in it, I'm not necessarily the most skilled person at it, and that probably shows in what I'm doing. But I'm having good fun, I'm learning stuff as I go along, and I am learning how to adjust things and tweak things, and that's what doing stuff like this is all about. Nobody, you know, this isn't a commission, nobody's asked me to paint this for them. This is me trying out some new supplies, so I mean everything here is alien to me. That's new paint, new paintbrushes, new paper. So the idea here is not to set the expectation too high, but in doing, this is how we learn, and you know, by having to make adjustments and things as we go along because things don't look quite the way we hoped they would, this is how we learn, this is how we get better. Obviously taking classes, watching YouTube videos is incredibly helpful as well, and it helps accelerate that process, but sometimes we don't necessarily want the pressure of that. And I certainly feel that a lot, especially because, generally speaking, I'm quite busy. And sometimes I just want to relax and enjoy myself. And if I can push myself on a wee bit while I'm doing that, without it feeling like that's what I'm doing, then, well, that makes me quite happy. So I just want to add in a little bit more here. Again, I'm trying to I'm trying to avoid this paler area a little bit. So leave that to dry. While that's drying, I'm going to go and grab my gouache. I was trying to pull the box out that my gouache is in. It's on a shelf with stuff piled on top of it, and everything else in the shelf just basically collapsed inwards, so I'll deal with that later. So this is the gouache that I use. It is the Winsor & Newton Designer's Gouache. Come on, autofocus, you can do it. I don't know what is wrong with this camera just now. There we go. These tubes are relatively inexpensive, and gouache is great for stuff like this because it still plays well, it's water soluble, but you can get some really crisp lines with it if you don't dilute it completely. When I'm doing fine details, I like to use it straight from the tube, but for a softening effect we can add a tiny little bit of water if we want to blend it in, but we need to make sure this is absolutely dry. I have done other videos on gouache, so if you want to check them out, I'll leave a link to a couple of them down in the description, and I'll stick one in the end card for you as well if gouache is a type of paint you're not familiar with. But you can see it's very, very thick. Its consistency is usually quite viscous, and that's what we want because that's how you get pinpoint accuracy with it. And a lot of artists use it for highlights on animal and human portraits, also for things like whiskers. So this is where we're going to employ our teeny tiny brush. So this is our number 2 brush. So usually when I'm doing this, I have a damp brush, but I've not actually mixed any water. I like to take it straight from the tube when I am putting in highlights or any sort of things like that. So just grabbing it straight from there. Again, this is an unfamiliar brush to me, so we'll see how this goes. So I'm going to start with the water, and really what I just want to do is put in some indications that the water is not completely still. You know, if the sky's like this, there's a chance that things are a bit unsteady, a bit, you know, so we can do that. Now, again, less is more in this situation. Do a little bit at a time. It's much easier to add more than it is to take away. So deliberately using unsteady lines here. And then what I can do is just add a little bit of water to my brush, so just a damp brush here. And if I want to just dilute this a little bit, then I can. So take away that harsh edge at the bottom of some of these. Now I want to have more around this area because this is where my lightning bolt's coming down. So that light is going to reflect off the water a bit more here. And I'm going to start from here. And I'm just going to get this down. Now this paper is textured, so we might have to take a bit of work here, but that's okay. So at the exit point from the clouds here, I've got a watered down area. So put that in first, and then again, just with a wet brush, smooth out some of these under areas here. Don't want to obliterate them completely, but again, just take away that sort of solid line. And just following the shape of my clouds here, it's going to be fairly obvious that it's gone, you know, it's crack. And it's put that little sort of flash bulb effect on some of the areas of the clouds. Other lines. Now we will have to go back over these. We are working on top of very, very dark paint here. And if the gouache is even slightly watered down, then that's going to be apparent. But just now we just really want to get those lines in to indicate where we want them. If I tilt that in the light slightly, you can see the gouache a lot better. Again, it's just the light in the camera. If I tilt it like that, that's how much it's actually standing out in real life. So yeah, this is a lovely little exercise. See if you want to familiarise yourself with this. Really simple idea for a painting. I mean, nothing complicated. But when you're using things that are unfamiliar to you, sometimes it is a good idea to stick to simple concepts because it really lets you concentrate on getting a feel for your tools rather than trying to concentrate on the composition of your painting. So overall, I'm actually quite tempted to go back in with a little bit more gouache, but let's take this off and take a wee step back and just have a look and see how we feel about it and what we think. In terms of the actual supplies themselves, these paintbrushes are lovely, like they really, really are. For someone like me that's not a professional painter, but is, you know, does do a fair bit of painting, would I say the cost of them is justified? Being someone that gets on well with the cheap synthetic brushes, probably not. And I don't think I would go out of my way to buy myself them because they are very expensive, but they are lovely. There is no denying it. Like, there is absolutely no denying it. So yeah, I think that's one of those things that maybe if I was painting full time and selling all my artworks, then yes, I probably would. But other than that, you know, they're nice, but I don't think it justifies the cost. So there is the finished article. And yes, I am feeling that I am going to have to go back with some more gouache. More gouache, let's go. I kind of do this a lot, don't I? But this is what it's all about. But also knowing when to stop as well. So I'm going to really water down this gouache I've got just in my little palette. Oops, shot. I've put quite a lot of water in there. And I think what I want to do is, I don't really want to take away from this lightning bolt idea, but, oh, that was far too heavy-handed. I think I might just want to put in a little bit here. I've got a feeling though that will that will fade out because it is very, very watered down. And again, just as I did before, if I clean my brush off, just have it damp and then work on this bottom side and just sort of blend that out a little bit, maybe in the top. Okay, yeah, a bit happier with that because again, where that lining is, I want the reflection of the actual horizon line, which obviously is the sea at this point. So it might be an idea to even just toughen this line up a little bit. Yeah, that's better. Okay, right, happy with that. Okay, guys, I'm going to call it quits there. All that's left for me to do is sign the bottom of this. I have had the best time, and yeah, this is good fun. Like, stuff like this is fun to me because there's no pressure, and for me, that's what art should be about, and I feel very privileged to be able to be using some top-notch supplies in the process. It's all good. So let's see if I can do this without making a mess of it now with this teeny brush. Not really, but that's okay. This is good a signature as any. So there you go, guys. I hope you've learned something today, or this has been an informative video for you, or maybe you've just enjoyed listening to me chunter along while I paint. If you'd like to try something like this out, obviously you don't have to do it with really fancy supplies. Watercolour paper, I think I mentioned this before, the Strathmore 400 watercolour paper is a bit more reasonably priced, but it's still a good quality watercolour. It will take a lot of layers of water without destroying your paint and, you know, like the paper disintegrating. In terms of paintbrushes, it really is down to preference. Some of the own brand brushes that have a similar sort of feel to the likes of the Black Velvet brushes, in particular the Jackson's own brand brushes that look a little bit like this. Now again, this was, unsurprisingly, it was Julia that put me onto these ones. The Jackson's quill brushes, these are really nice. They do the same sort of job in that they hold a lot of water. So you're going through the same sort of process if you're doing something like that. And these are much, much, much cheaper, but they still do a good job. And in terms of paint, again, well, we've reviewed lots of different types of paints, and these watercolours, the Daniel Smith watercolours, are very, very expensive. There are plenty of other brands. And one of my favourites, and it still remains a favourite to this day, by Winsor & Newton, and it's the Cotman selection. So that is a student grade paint, and the Payne's grey in that set's lovely. It's really, really good. So you can achieve something similar with this. And again, the gouache, this is not expensive. A tube of this set me back, I think, about £5 at the time. I don't know what the prices are like now. I'll check and put that up on the screen for you as well. So that's it for today, guys. As always, I will welcome your comments, any thoughts you have yourself. If you've had experience of any of these products, please feel free to chime in down in the comments section. And I will see you back in the cave on Sunday for another video. So have a great day, everyone, and bye-bye for now.